When I followed my daughter into the washroom, the ground beneath my feet seemed to vanish. There she stood, Nayab, whom I had sent to Kulsum for Quranic memorization, with an innocent baby in her arms. The baby, silent and fragile, seemed to narrate everything without uttering a word. My mind went blank, and a single question tore through my soul. Who was the one responsible for my daughter's disgrace? How did this happen to her? Who deceived her and brought her to this point? This story will leave you stunned. At the end lies a secret you must uncover by following the tale to its conclusion. When I sent my daughter Nayab to Kulsum for Quran memorization, the entire neighborhood criticized me, calling me a foolish mother. Everyone said I had made a terrible decision, but I couldn't understand what was so wrong. Kulsum seemed like a virtuous woman. She taught children the Quran for free, offered them a stipend, and even provided a meal each day. If she were truly bad, no one would send their children to her. Ignoring everyone's remarks, I placed my trust in her. Gradually, I began noticing changes in Nayab's behavior. She was no longer the same. It felt as though a part of her personality had been lost. One day, as she headed toward the bathroom, I decided to follow her out of suspicion. What I witnessed stole my senses and left me utterly shaken. How could my Nayab change so drastically? Who had taught her these things? My husband Cameron was a different matter altogether. He was the most irresponsible man I had ever met. From the very first day of our marriage, I felt as though he didn't want this relationship. It was as if someone had forced him to marry me. He never showed me affection or gave my existence any importance. He was a handsome man, but I never saw joy on his face. Handsome men usually find happiness in their beautiful wives. But Kamran never made room for me in his heart. Time moved on after our marriage, and Allah blessed us with a daughter. Even then, there was no happiness on Kamran's face. It was as though he ignored the very idea of being a father to a daughter. He seemed lost in his thoughts, and I often wondered who or what occupied his mind so much. But I never found an answer. After some time, my mother-in-law passed away. Following her death, Kamran's neglect grew worse. When Nayab grew older, Kamran distanced himself even further. One day, he announced he wanted to move to another city. I understood it was just an excuse. He wanted to escape his responsibilities. Perhaps he felt reassured knowing that my brother-in-law and his wife lived next door, with a shared pathway between our homes. It gave him the comfort of leaving me and our daughter behind without a second thought. He quietly moved to another city, leaving me to live with Nayab. I still remember when we got married, Kamran never even bothered to look at me. I dressed up for him, wore clothes in his favorite colors, cooked his favorite dishes, but his attitude never changed. He was indifferent to me, as though my presence was entirely meaningless to him. When a woman doesn't receive the love of a husband, she pours herself into the role of a mother. And that's exactly what happened to me. I became a mother, and nothing else remained of my identity. But the problem was, Kamran wasn't attached to me, nor was he attached to his daughter. From childhood, Nayab lived a life starved of love and attention. Whether her father was present or absent made no difference to her. As a result, she struggled academically. For 3 consecutive years, Nayab's school performance was poor. The school administration repeatedly advised me to steer her toward religious education as she seemed uninterested in academics. Hearing this, I thought perhaps memorizing the Quran would be better for Nayab. At least she would gain religious knowledge and find purpose in her life. But trusting madrasas was not an easy decision. My family objected strongly. They argued that girls in our family don't go to madrasas and that it didn't seem appropriate. Around this time, I learned about a woman named Kulsum who lived in our neighborhood. She offered free Quran memorization lessons for children. I decided to take Nayab to her house. When I met Kulsum, she seemed like a kind-hearted and pleasant woman. There was a certain charm in her demeanor. Her husband worked abroad, and she had 2 young sons. I told Kulsum about Nayab, and she listened attentively and sincerely. When she casually asked for my husband's name, a flicker of surprise crossed her face for a brief moment. She said, "So you live alone?" I replied helplessly, "Yes, I have to manage alone. Kamran works in another city." Talking to Kulsum turned out to be a comforting experience for me in the midst of my loneliness. For the first time in years, it felt like someone genuinely listened to me. Kulsum wasn't just polite. Her personality radiated compassion and tranquility, as if she were soothing the wounds of my heart. There are some people whose words bring peace, and she was one of them. I was deeply impressed by her warmth and kindness. Kulsum spoke to Nayab with the same love and affection as though she had known her for years. She said to Nayab, "Dear, if you're not interested in studies, it's nothing to worry about. It's not a big deal. I'll help you memorize the Quran, and you'll see how beneficial this education will be for you." Nayab quietly listened. Kulsum continued, "The education of the Quran is the best of all. It will benefit you not only in this world, but also in the hereafter." Kulsum also mentioned that she provided a small monthly stipend to the children to encourage them and even arrange for lunch. She added, "It's okay if you don't want to eat, but most children feel hungry, so I've made arrangements for them." Looking at Kulsum's clean and well-maintained home, I said, "Mashallah, your house is beautiful and spotless. You must be a great cook. It's wonderful that you take care of meals and stipends. I'd be very happy for Nayab to memorize the Quran with you." Kulsum smiled and replied, "I do all of this for the pleasure of Allah. It's my duty to ensure children are happy and receive a good education." Then she laughed and said, "You see, even Allah has a system of give and take with humans. Do good deeds and you'll be rewarded with paradise. Do bad and there's hell. This give and take exists in this world too. Humans have greed, and sometimes that greed compels them to do good deeds." I nodded in agreement and said, "You're absolutely right. Even acts of charity are often driven by the expectation of a reward." Kulsum's words touched my heart. I felt reassured that I had found an excellent teacher for my daughter. I finally decided to send Nayab to Kulsum from the next day. Kulsum cheerfully agreed, saying, "Inshallah, let's start tomorrow." When I asked Nayab how she found Kulsum, she immediately replied, "She's very nice, Amma. She's a really good teacher." Kulsum's words had left a strong impression on me, or perhaps Nayab was simply looking for a way to escape the rigors of school and studies. Whatever the reason, both outcomes seemed satisfactory to me. If my daughter wasn't thriving in school, at least she could memorize the Quran. People would also see that I had made a good decision by steering Nayab toward religious education. Sending Nayab to Kulsum brought a sense of peace to my heart. I silently thanked Allah for introducing me to such a kind-hearted teacher who not only imparted religious knowledge, but also cared for the well-being of her students. Kulsum's love and sincerity gave me new hope. I was convinced that this path would be the best for Nayab. After making this decision, I thought I should inform Kamran. He deserved to know what I had decided for our daughter. I called him and told him that Nayab had been expelled from school because she had failed for 3 consecutive years. I explained that I had decided to send her to a woman in the neighborhood to memorize the Quran. As always, Kamran didn't pay much attention. He sounded busy and simply said, "Okay, do what you think is best." Then he ended the call. It became clear to me that these matters were unimportant to Kamran. I realized there was no point in discussing or seeking his advice further. When I told my sister-in-law that I was sending Nayab to Kulsum for Quran memorization, she immediately objected. She said, "Where are you sending your daughter?" Surprised, I replied, "To a woman named Kulsum who teaches children the Quran for free." With a frown, my sister-in-law warned, "Don't send her to her." When I asked why, "What's wrong with her? She teaches children in a good environment with proper modesty. What's the issue?" My sister-in-law replied in an unusual tone, "I've heard she's not a good woman. I'm advising you, don't send your daughter there." I dismissed her concerns and said, "People always look for excuses to gossip. She's a modest woman who serves good food and treats children with kindness. I don't see anything wrong with her." After a pause, my sister-in-law insisted, "Still, I would advise you not to send your daughter there." But I was firm in my decision. I said, when Nayab was struggling in school and no one stepped forward to help, things could have turned out differently if someone had supported her. Now that I've taken a step on my own, no one has the right to object. Hearing this, Hajra fell silent. It was the truth. I had asked her several times to help Nayab with her studies, since I was uneducated and couldn't teach my daughter myself. But every time she'd claim she didn't have the time. Now that I had made a decision, her objections felt baseless. Besides Hajra, a few others also made remarks, but I ignored them. I had met Kulsum personally and found nothing wrong with her character. People will always talk, Resolving to stand by my decision, I sent Nayab to Kulsum. 3 or 4 days had passed since Nayab started going to Kulsum. One day, she came home excitedly and said, "Ami, today Kulsum Ayapa made biryani for us. Yesterday, she made kofta. And for dessert, we had halwa. She even gave us fruits." Hearing this made me happy. Kulsum didn't just serve food, but ensured it was clean and of good quality. Even if it had been simple lentils and bread, it would have been enough for me. But her thoughtful preparation of delicious meals surely won the children's hearts. My husband, Kamran, was working in another city, sending just enough money to cover household expenses. He never cared about my needs or desires. I never asked for new clothes or expressed any other wishes because I knew his heart wasn't warm toward me. But when I saw Nayab enjoying good food at Kulsum's, my heart felt at peace. Sending Nayab to Kulsum became a ray of hope for me. I felt she was not only gaining religious education, but also enjoying a positive environment. That day was my wedding anniversary. I thought perhaps it might be special, that Kamran might remember me or at least send a loving message. I dressed carefully, wearing my favorite clothes, and even took a picture of myself to send to him. Deep inside, I hoped for a response, maybe a compliment or some acknowledgement of how I looked. But he didn't reply. Not a word. No phone call. I sat in my room talking to myself. Over and over, I wondered why my husband never acknowledged me, as though my presence meant nothing to him. I muttered to myself, do I really mean nothing to him? Am I not worth even a single response? Lost in these thoughts, I heard Nayab's voice from behind me. "Ami, it's because he doesn't like you." Her words struck me like a blow. I turned to her angrily and asked, "Who told you that he doesn't like me?" Nayab hesitated before replying, "Ami, no one told me, but I've noticed he never looks at you." That's why I said it. There was a shadow of helplessness in my eyes, but I said firmly, "Nayab, don't ever eavesdrop on my conversations again. It's a bad habit." Nayab immediately apologized, but her words had pierced my heart like a dagger. Perhaps she was telling the truth, revealing a reality I couldn't bear. During this time, I began noticing some strange things happening with Nayab. One day, when she returned from Quran lessons at Kulsum's house, I saw her limping. Concerned, I asked, "Nayab, what happened? Why are you limping?" She quickly replied, "Ami, I twisted my ankle on the way." I asked worriedly, "It's just a short walk. How did you twist your ankle?" Nayab dismissed my concern, saying, "I don't know, Ami, but it doesn't hurt much. I'm fine." I suggested, "Should you take a day off tomorrow?" She adamantly refused, saying, "No, Ami, Kulsum Appa said we shouldn't miss lessons." I gave her some medicine and suggested wrapping her ankle, but she insisted the pain wasn't severe and would go away on its own. The next day, she was still limping. I asked again, "Nayab, does your ankle still hurt?" She replied, "It hurts a little, but I can manage." My worry grew. I thought she might have an internal injury and decided to take her to a doctor. When I said, "Let's go see a doctor," she suddenly panicked. "Ami, I don't want to go to a doctor." Her reaction surprised me. She had never hesitated to visit the neighborhood doctor before. In fact, she usually went willingly. I gently tried to reason with her. "Nayab, what's the problem with going to a doctor? If it hurts, they'll give you medicine." But she kept refusing. "Ami, I'm perfectly fine. I don't want to go to the doctor." I couldn't understand what was wrong with Nayab. Her behavior seemed unusual, as if she was hiding something. I consoled myself thinking that if the pain worsened, she would eventually ask to see a doctor. Meanwhile, my responsibilities at home kept piling up: cooking, cleaning, grocery shopping, and looking after Nayab's studies. All of it was exhausting. But Nayab's behavior left a seed of doubt in my mind, a doubt that only grew with time. A year had passed, and Kamran hadn't returned home. People in the neighborhood didn't miss a chance to stir trouble. Some would say, "Salma, something's off. Your husband is only 4 hours away. Why hasn't he come home in a year?" Others took it further, whispering, "Maybe he's gotten married to someone else over there." These rumors were another source of torment for me. On one hand, there was Kamran's indifference. On the other, Nayab's changing behavior. And now these relentless rumors. Everything weighed heavily on my mind. I often cried in silence, trying to appear strong on the outside. One day I noticed Nayab acting strangely in her room. She quickly hid something under her pillow when she saw me. I asked, "Nayab, what's in your hand?" Startled, she replied, "Nothing, Emmy." I insisted, "Show me what you're hiding." She hesitated and said, "It's nothing really." Her reaction was shy, as if it were something trivial. I decided not to press further, thinking it might just be a childish habit. The next day, while cleaning her room, I found a piece of tamarind under her pillow. Smiling to myself, I realized that this was what she had been hiding. I remembered how in our childhood, we would also secretly stash tangy sweet treats to enjoy later. I reassured myself that it was perfectly normal. Nayab was still a child, and these were just harmless quirks. But little did I know these small, innocent incidents were preludes to much larger realities waiting to unfold. The real turning point came when Kamran unexpectedly returned home one day. Seeing him at the door, I was both surprised and happy. A flicker of hope rose in my heart. Perhaps he had come to spend time with us. Smiling, I said, "You're home? That's such a pleasant surprise." But his cold response extinguished my joy instantly. "I'm just here for one night. I need to pick up some important documents." My happiness faded in a heartbeat. I asked, "If it was just about the documents, you could have told me. I would have sent them with someone. Why go through all this trouble?" Without answering, he went straight to his room and started looking for the papers. I tried to engage him in conversation, but he wasn't willing to listen. He arrived in the evening, and by the next morning, he was preparing to leave again. I hurried to prepare breakfast and took it to his room, only to find he was already gone. Later, he called. "I've left," he said. Hearing this, my heart shattered. Tears welled up in my eyes, but I held back. I didn't say anything on the phone, just quietly ended the call and sat down to cry. Talking to myself, I kept wondering, what did I do to push him so far away? Was my love not enough? Did I make a mistake that upset him? So many years had passed since our marriage, and our daughter had grown up. Yet Kamran never gave me respect or love. I had always been loyal, obeying his every decision, sacrificing my desires to make his life easier. And what did he give me in return? My mind was a whirlwind of questions. Why was he like this? Even after all these years of marriage, why did he remain so distant? People often asked me, "Why is your husband like this?" And I never had an answer. Sometimes I felt like I was the biggest mistake of his life. Maybe he was never capable of loving me. Perhaps this marriage was just a responsibility he carried reluctantly, a burden. But for me, this marriage was my dream, my everything. My tears wouldn't stop, but then I pulled myself together. Who can fight fate? I decided that my entire focus would now be on Nayab. She was my only solace in life. I vowed to do everything for her so that she wouldn't have to live a fragmented life like mine. Yet, at times, Nayab's behavior seemed odd, as if she were hiding something from me. One day, as I sat alone in the house, an inexplicable sadness enveloped me. My heart felt heavy, weighed down by unspoken desires and unfulfilled dreams. It was as if my very soul was shackled by everything I had never been able to express. At that moment, Nayab came and sat beside me. Looking at me, she asked, "Ammi, why do you worry so much about Abu? He doesn't love you, that's why he behaves the way he does." Her words pierced my heart like a dagger. I stared at her in shock. My own daughter, who was still so young, how could she say such a thing? I immediately reprimanded her. "Who told you this? Don't say such things." Lowering her head, she replied, "Ammi, you think I don't know, but I understand everything. Abu doesn't love you, and it's your fault. You failed to win his heart." Her words left me deeply wounded, as if time had come to a halt. In anger, I said, "Nayab, leave this room right now or I'll slap you. Who gave you the right to talk like this? This is none of your business." Nayab quietly left, but her words echoed in my soul. Was she telling the truth? Or were these just the naive musings of a child? These questions left me restless. Her words kept resonating in my mind. Had my daughter truly grasped the issues in our life? Did she understand why her father kept his distance from me? I tried to console myself, thinking that perhaps this was because she was growing up, standing on the threshold of adulthood, and her eyes were now beginning to see the realities of life. I told myself it was natural, but deep within, there was a lingering ache. A persistent question haunted me. Was Nayab right? Had I really failed to love Kamran properly? This question gnawed at me from the inside, but I kept myself busy with household chores to distract my mind. One day, something strange happened. I heard a phone ringing, but it wasn't my phone. The ringtone was different. At first, I thought it might be coming from the neighbor's house, but the sound was so close it felt like it was coming from within my own house. The ringtone played for a few seconds and then abruptly stopped. I brushed it off, convincing myself it must have been someone passing by on the street, but a strange doubt had taken root in my heart. I searched the entire house, checking each room, but found nothing. I tried to reassure myself, telling myself not to overthink it. It was just my imagination. Yet that sound lingered in my mind, feeding an underlying unease. Then one day I noticed Nayab hurriedly getting ready. Observing her closely, I was stunned. She had applied light makeup, kohl around her eyes, a touch of lipstick on her lips, and a rosy blush on her cheeks. I was surprised. Why had she suddenly dressed up like this? Where was she going, and why had she put in so much effort to adorn herself? An unknown restlessness crept into my heart. I called out to her and asked, "Nayab, why are you wearing makeup? You're going to read the Quran. What's the need for all this?" She paused for a moment, as if caught off guard, then quickly replied, "Ami, there's a small gathering at Kulsum Appa's house today. A girl has completed her Quran memorization, so everyone's been invited." I gently said, "All right, but the gathering is about completing the Quran. Why worry about appearances for such an event?" My sister-in-law hesitantly said, "I'm not saying she's doing anything wrong, but ever since she's been going to Kulsum's, I've noticed something strange." Interrupting her, I replied, "Stop overthinking. Every girl goes through phases where she develops new interests. It's important for parents to understand and support their children. If you think there's an issue, it's better to focus on your own life rather than meddling in others' affairs." She fell silent, as if she had nothing more to say. But her words planted seeds of doubt in my heart. Was I trusting Nayab too much, dismissing everything she did as harmless? Perhaps I needed to spend more time with her. After all, a daughter can be her mother's closest friend, but that bond only strengthens when the mother truly understands her child's feelings. Lovingly, I said to Nayab, "Dear, you're growing up, and I understand that you're discovering new interests. This age is like that. But remember one thing, always prioritize your dignity and self-respect. The education of the Quran is not just about learning, it's meant to guide our lives onto the right path." Nayab listened carefully to what I said and replied, "Ami, I understand what you're saying. I only wore makeup today because it was a gathering and everyone was coming dressed up." Her explanation brought me some relief. I promised her that I would never let her feel alone. That night, I decided that I would take her out the next day to spend some quality time together. The next morning, I told Nayab, "Today we'll go to the market together and spend some time outside." Nayab was delighted. At the market, I bought her some nice clothes and treated her to her favorite foods. Smiling, she said, "Ami, today was really nice." That day, I felt my decision was right. Spending time together was not only strengthening our bond, but also showing Nayab that I was there for her and always would be. The following day, I suggested another outing. I told Nayab, "Today we'll go to a hotel for lunch." Initially, she hesitated and said, "Ami, there's a gathering at Kulsum Appa's place today. I have to attend." I gently replied, "You can go to the gathering in the evening. Let's have lunch together first." She agreed, but there was an unusual uneasiness on her face. At the hotel, Nayab was strangely quiet. She kept glancing around nervously, as if hiding something. I thought perhaps it was because of the gathering or some other concern. Suddenly, she said, "Ami, I need to use the washroom." She got up quickly and headed toward the restroom. Her behavior caught my attention. An unexplained fear began to grip my heart. Something wasn't right. I could feel it. A few moments passed and I decided to follow her. As I reached the bathroom door, I heard her muffled voice from inside. My heart started pounding. Peeking through the slight gap in the door, I saw Nayab holding a mobile phone and talking to someone. Her face showed clear signs of nervousness and fear, as if she was hiding something. Then I noticed her clothing. A pink gown-like dress was visible beneath her shalwar kameez, something not typical of her usual attire. She kept adjusting her outfit repeatedly. My heart raced. I immediately opened the door and snatched the phone from her hand. Startled, Nayab turned to look at me, fear evident in her eyes. I asked her sternly, "What's going on? Where did this phone come from?" She stammered, "Ami, it's not mine." I glanced at her clothes again and my suspicions deepened. Angrily, I demanded, "Tell me the truth, Nayab. What is all this?" She had no answer. My voice grew firmer, my eyes filled with worry. It felt as though the ground beneath my feet had been pulled away. "Whose phone is this? Who were you talking to?" I asked furiously. Her face displayed both fear and shame, but her next words shook my world. Hesitantly, she said, "Ami, this is Hassan's phone. He loves me, and I love him too. I'm going to marry him." My eyes turned red with anger. I shouted, "What nonsense are you talking about? Who taught you all this?" Nayab interrupted me, saying, "Ami, I haven't done anything wrong. Loving someone is not a sin, and marriage should only be with the one you love." My heart sank. I sternly asked, "Who filled your head with these ideas?" She replied, "Kulsum Aapa taught me all this." Hearing Kulsum's name, my breath quickened. My voice trembled with shock and rage. I asked, "Kulsum, why would she teach you these things?" Nayab looked at me and revealed a truth that clenched my heart like a fist. She said, "Ami, Kulsum Aapa told me that Abu didn't marry you out of love. He loved someone else, but his family forced him to marry you. That's why he has never looked at you with love. Kulsum Aapa said I shouldn't make the same mistake you did." Her words shook me to my core. All the doubts I had about Nayab's transformation suddenly crystallized into a painful reality. The very next day, I knocked on Kulsum's door. She came out with her usual carefree smile. I said angrily, "What have you been teaching my daughter?" Kulsum nonchalantly replied, "I haven't done anything wrong. I only told her the truth." I yelled, "So the truth is that you taught her to love and marry whoever she wants?" Shrugging her shoulders, Kulsum said, "Yes, because loving someone isn't a sin. If she loves someone, it's her right to decide her life for herself." Her words felt like poison to me. I shouted, "Was this your revenge? You poisoned my daughter against me?" In a mocking tone, Kulsum replied, "Not revenge. I'm teaching your daughter what no one ever taught you. I'm teaching her how to refine herself, how to make herself charming so that a man would like her and want to be with her. I was teaching her to walk in heels, but unfortunately, she twisted her ankle and started limping. I'm teaching her how to value herself, how to make herself significant." Kulsum's words left me trembling. She continued, "I wish someone had taught you all this. You weren't unattractive, but you never tried to enhance yourself. You could have been more beautiful than me, but you ruined your own life." I was stunned. Her words felt like whips against my soul. Darkness clouded my vision as I realized that Kulsum had turned my daughter against me and my life. Her intent was to destroy my home, and she had cleverly succeeded. Kulsum hurled another venomous arrow at me. "The truth is, your husband never loved you because he loved me. I only taught your daughter not to make the same mistake you did." My heart pounded uncontrollably. My mind became entangled in the agonizing moments of my past, my husband's behavior, Nayab's words, and Kulsum's venomous revelations. It all felt like poison running through my veins. I had no idea how I would shield my daughter from all of this. Finally, I decided to confront Kamran with the truth. When I told him everything, he was silent for a while. His face bore signs of guilt and regret. After a long pause, he lowered his head and said, "Salma, it's true. I love Kulsum." His confession weighed heavily on my heart. In a trembling voice, I asked, "If you loved her so much, then why has that love never brought you happiness?" He replied despondently, "Our relationship was misunderstood by everyone. My family doubted her character, so they didn't allow our marriage." His words triggered a deep chasm within me. Everything I had heard about Kulsum came rushing back to my mind. My husband, who was a prisoner of a failed love, was now admitting to shattering my life. I realized that sending my daughter to Kulsum was perhaps the biggest mistake of my life. The rumors circulating in the neighborhood were true, but no one had ever dared to tell me directly. The ambiguous accusations about Kulsum and her true character had turned into my worst nightmare. I firmly warned Nayab, forget all these things. They are just words, not reality. But even I wasn't sure if my words carried enough weight to erase the poison Kulsum had planted in her mind. Kamran's confession was merely a moment of shame for him, but it shattered my entire existence. While he may have accepted his mistakes, it was unbearable for me to realize that my marriage, my relationship, was built on a lie. That moment was filled with pain and regret. I understood that Kamran was a failed lover who would always live in the shadow of his failure. But a question lingered in my heart. What was my fault in all of this? I had dreamed of a beautiful journey of love and marriage, but the reality was far from it, something I could never have anticipated. Kamran's admission left a deep scar on my heart. I wondered if I would spend the rest of my life enduring this failure, or if I would find a new path for myself and my daughter. Perhaps the decisions made by elders are always correct, and what they plan for us is best. But life's reality is that what has already happened cannot be undone. Despite everything, some decisions, some words, and some actions take people far from where they once were. Life places us at crossroads filled with confusion and uncertainty. My husband's broken heart never allowed our relationship to be complete. He remained a prisoner of his past love, while I became nothing more than a shadow in his life. Now that poison has seeped into my daughter's mind as well. Kulsum has filled her thoughts with ideas that have stolen my peace and sleep. I fear what lies ahead, whether my daughter will walk the same path that destroyed my husband. It is true, a divided person belongs to no one, not even themselves. My husband's life is living proof of this. His broken spirit shattered me, and now I am trying to hold on to my daughter so that she doesn't end up as incomplete as I am. But this story doesn't end here. This is not just my story. It is the story of every mother who sacrifices her dreams for her daughter. The story of mothers who remain loyal but never receive the love they deserve. I have made a vow. My daughter will make her own decisions, but she will never forget her dignity and self-respect. I have explained to her that love is not wrong, but losing oneself in the name of love is the greatest mistake. This story may end, but its lesson remains. Never sacrifice your emotions or dreams for others. Every relationship stands on the pillars of love, trust, and loyalty. If even one of these weakens, the relationship crumbles. If you've listened to this story till the end, do share your thoughts with us. This story reveals a truth that has destroyed many lives. For more eye-opening and thought-provoking tales, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon so you never miss an update. Because these stories are not just for listening, they're for reflection.